If you've been watching Tesla for any length of time, you already know the pattern. A refresh shows up, people focus on the obvious stuff, new headlights, a new screen layout, maybe some new ambient lighting, and then the internet spends a week arguing about whether it looks better or worse. But the bigger story usually isn't the features, it's the math. And if the 2026 Tesla Model Y Juniper refresh plays out the way Tesla refreshes typically do, the ownership math could change more than the feature list ever will. Let's talk about what that actually means in real life, because ownership math sounds abstract until you put it into dollars, monthly payments, resale values, insurance premiums, charging costs, and the opportunity cost of buying now versus waiting. First, a quick reality check. Tesla doesn't always do model years like traditional automakers, and the name Juniper has been used as a rumored internal codename rather than a public trim badge. So instead of pretending we know every confirmed spec, I'm going to focus on what tends to change during a Tesla refresh, and more importantly, how those changes ripple through cost of ownership for new buyers, used buyers, and current owners. Here's the key idea. When a refresh lands, three things can happen at the same time. 1. The new version can be slightly better in a bunch of small ways. 2. The older version can suddenly become the old one, which affects resale value. And 3. Tesla's pricing strategy, discounting inventory, adjusting MSRP, shifting which trims qualify for incentives, can move the monthly payment more than any new feature ever could. And that's why a refresh can change the ownership math more than it adds features. Let's start with the most obvious financial lever, purchase price. With Tesla, the sticker price is not a static number, it's a variable. Traditional car companies might lock pricing for a model year and then rely on dealer discounts. Tesla will adjust pricing directly, sometimes multiple times per year, and then also offer inventory discounts that effectively create a spread between MSRP and what people actually pay. If Juniper arrives, there are two likely price behaviors, and both affect you. Scenario A, the refreshed Model Y launches at a similar price to the outgoing one, maybe slightly higher at first. That's common with refreshes, early demand is strong and Tesla doesn't need to stimulate it. If you're a buyer who must have the newest, you're paying closer to full price and you might have fewer financing promos, fewer inventory deals, and fewer negotiation levers because, well, there's no dealer and there may not be much stock. Scenario B, Tesla tries to keep price parity or even undercut competitors, and the refreshed Model Y launches aggressively priced. That would be very Tesla, especially if production efficiencies improve or if Tesla is trying to hold market share. In that case, the new version can actually compress the resale value of the previous version even harder, because buyers will look at used listings and say, why would I pay close to new money for the old body style? Either way, the outgoing Model Y often gets discounted as Tesla clears inventory, and this is where the ownership math starts to swing wildly. Because for many buyers, the difference between buy now and wait isn't old versus new. It's discounted outgoing model versus full-price refreshed model. A $3,000 to $5,000 inventory discount, plus maybe a favorable financing offer, can beat a refresh that gives you nicer interior materials. If your goal is cost per mile and you're not emotionally attached to the refresh, the outgoing model, at the right price, can be the better financial move. Now let's talk incentives, because incentives are the second lever that can dwarf feature changes. In the US, federal tax credit eligibility has been a huge swing factor, and it's not just does the car qualify. It's which configuration qualifies at which time and whether you can claim it and whether it applies at point of sale. For some households, that credit effectively reduces the price by thousands immediately. If Juniper changes battery sourcing, trims, or pricing thresholds, the incentive story can shift. That means two identical-looking monthly payments can hide very different total costs. Someone might say, I got a Model Y for X. But what they really got was X minus credit plus fees minus inventory discount, and those components can change within the same calendar year. So if you're planning around a refresh, you don't just ask, what features are new? You ask, will the trim I want still qualify for any incentives I can actually use? Because if you lose eligibility, you may be paying effectively thousands more for marginal improvements. The third lever is financing. Interest rates and financing promos can change the monthly payment more than a refresh changes the car. People underestimate this all the time. Let's do a simple example. Say you're financing $40,000 after down payment. At 6.5% over 72 months, you're paying roughly $670 a month, give or take depending on fees and taxes. If Tesla runs a promo rate or you refinance later, that can drop materially. If rates rise, it can jump. Over the life of the loan, that's thousands in interest. Real money that has nothing to do with whether the cabin is quieter. So the refresh decision often becomes, do you pay a higher price and a higher rate for the new one, or do you grab the outgoing one at a discount with potentially better financing terms? The answer for a value-focused buyer frequently points to the outgoing one, assuming you're okay living with the older design. But there's another angle, depreciation and resale value. This is where current owners feel the refresh the most. When a refreshed model appears, the market often marks down the prior version because it's visually and psychologically dated, even if it's still excellent. This happens across brands, but Tesla's fast iteration can amplify it. If Juniper looks noticeably different, new front end, updated interior, better noise insulation, used buyers might discount earlier Model Ys more aggressively, especially if the price gap between used and new narrows. That's not just a theoretical concern. Depreciation is typically the biggest cost in car ownership, even more than fuel for many drivers. So a refresh can change the cost of ownership for people who already have the car, not because their car got worse, but because the resale market changed around them. Now, to keep this practical, let's consider the perspective of three groups: the buyer who wants to buy in the next 6 to 12 months, the buyer who can wait, and the owner who already has a Model Y. If you want to buy soon, the smartest approach is usually not to pick a side emotionally. Instead, set a target all-in effective price and watch what the market does. For example, decide what you're willing to pay after incentives, before taxes, whatever is relevant in your location. Then if the outgoing Model Y hits that number through inventory discounts, that's your signal to buy. If it doesn't and Juniper launches close to that number, that's your signal to wait. This avoids the trap where you wait forever because the next version might be better. There will always be a next version. Your job is to buy when the math makes sense for your budget and your use case. If you can wait and you care about refinement, noise, ride quality, interior fit, and finish, the refresh may be worth it. Tesla refreshes often focus on exactly those things, not necessarily adding a dramatic new capability, but making the car feel more complete. If you look at how Tesla handled other refresh cycles, it's often a collection of incremental improvements that add up. Better cabin isolation, tweaked suspension tuning, improved efficiency, updated HVAC acoustics, more thoughtful interior storage, revised seats, improved materials, maybe lighting changes, and revised tech integrations. Those are the kinds of changes you feel every day. And that daily quality of life improvement can be worth real money to some buyers, even if it doesn't show up on a spec sheet as 20 more horsepower. But again, the math. If Juniper costs significantly more, and you're the kind of person who keeps a car for a long time, the value question becomes, do those refinements reduce fatigue and increase enjoyment enough to justify the extra cost spread over, say, 7 to 10 years? For a long-term owner, paying an extra $3,000 or $4,000 for a nicer daily experience might be a rounding error. For someone stretching their budget, it can be the difference between comfortable and stressful. Now for current owners, the refresh can trigger two very different reactions. One reaction is panic, my car just lost value. The other is clarity, great, I can keep mine longer because it's still working fine. The correct reaction depends on your timeline. If you were planning to sell soon, a refresh can affect your resale price. If you were planning to keep it, resale value changes are mostly paper losses unless you're trading in soon. But a refresh can also create an opportunity for current owners. If you like the refreshed car, you can time your sell and buy to minimize depreciation hit. That might mean selling before the refresh becomes widely available, or it might mean waiting until the used market stabilizes. Tesla markets can be volatile. Used pricing can react quickly and then normalize. Let's shift from purchase and depreciation to operating costs, because this is where EV ownership math is different from gas cars. With a Model Y, your big operating costs are electricity, tires, insurance, and depreciation. Maintenance is usually lower than an ICE car, but not zero, and repairs, especially out of warranty, can be meaningful. Electricity is generally the easy win, but even that depends on your situation. If you charge at home at a decent rate, you can usually beat gas cost per mile. If you rely on fast charging a lot, the gap shrinks. Let's put numbers on it in a way that doesn't depend on exact Model Y efficiency claims. Assume 12,000 miles per year. Assume an average consumption around 280 watt-hours per mile. Your real number can be better or worse depending on climate, speed, tires, and driving style. That's about 3,360 kWh per year. If you pay 14 cents per kWh at home, that's about $470 per year. If your electricity is 25 cents per kWh, it's about $840 per year. If you do a lot of supercharging at effectively, say, 35 cents per kWh, then it's about $1,176 per year. Those are rough but useful anchors. Now compare to a gas crossover at 30 mpg. At 12,000 miles, that's 400 gallons. At $3.50 per gallon, you're at $1,400 a year. At $4.50 a gallon, $1,800 a year. So even with fairly expensive electricity, many people still come out ahead on fuel. But the big caveat is that electricity savings can be swallowed by higher insurance or faster depreciation. Insurance is the sleeper cost. For many households, it's the biggest surprise. If Juniper brings updated safety hardware, lower repair costs, or different parts pricing, insurance rates could change over time. But insurers often lag reality and base rates on historical claims data. If a refresh introduces new parts that are expensive or backordered, repair times can increase, which can increase claim costs, which can increase premiums. On the flip side, if the refresh reduces collision repair complexity or improves parts availability, it could help. The point is, a refresh can change your insurance cost indirectly, and you might not know until you quote it. That's why the most practical advice for buyers is to run insurance quotes for both the current Model Y and the refreshed version when it's listed in insurer databases, because a $100 a month difference in insurance is $1,200 a year. Over 5 years, that's $6,000. That's bigger than most feature changes. Tires are another real-world cost. The Model Y is heavy and has instant torque. Tires can wear faster than on a lighter gas crossover, especially if you enjoy the acceleration. If the refresh changes wheel sizes, tire compounds, alignment specs, or suspension tuning, it can change tire wear. A set of tires can easily be $1,000 to $1,600 depending on size and brand. If you replace them more frequently, that matters. So when someone says Juniper adds features, the more important question is whether it changes operating costs. If it improves efficiency even a little, that's nice, but it's rarely a huge dollar difference unless you drive a lot and electricity is expensive. But if it changes insurance cost, depreciation curve, or financing incentives, that's where the big swings happen. Now let's talk about the ownership math, in a way that helps you decide whether to buy the outgoing model, wait for the refresh, or even consider used. There are basically 4 ways to win financially with a Model Y purchase. 1. Buy new at a discounted effective price and keep it long enough that depreciation flattens out. EV depreciation tends to be steep early and then more stable later, like many cars. If you keep it 7 to 10 years, the refresh matters less. 2. Buy used after the refresh lands and the market reprices older cars downward. This is a classic move. Let someone else pay the early depreciation, then pick up a pre-refresh Model Y at a price that makes the cost per mile excellent. If you don't care about having the newest look, this can be the best value. 3. Buy the refresh early only if you expect it to hold value better. Sometimes the refreshed version becomes the desirable one and holds a premium, but you're betting on resale markets and you're paying for newness. This can make sense for people who rotate cars frequently, but it depends on the initial pricing. 4. Time your purchase around incentives and interest rates. This is not fun, but it matters. A lower APR or a tax credit can change the total cost more than any seat material upgrade. Now, what does Juniper changes ownership math more than it adds features look like in practice? It might look like this. The refreshed Model Y comes out, and suddenly there are discounted outgoing units on lots, plus the used market starts to soften on 2023-2025 cars. If you're a rational buyer, you might realize you can buy a lightly used pre-refresh Model Y for, say, 20% less than a new Juniper, and the day-to-day experience is still 90% the same. That's a huge ownership math win. Or it might look like the opposite. The refreshed Model Y launches with improvements that address the biggest complaints: noise, ride harshness, interior rattles, maybe some HVAC or cabin comfort tweaks, and the used market decides that the pre-refresh cars need a bigger discount to move. If you already own one and you plan to sell soon, your trade-in offers might dip, but if you're planning to keep it, you might not care. Also, a refresh can change the best trim selection. Sometimes the value leader shifts. Maybe the long range becomes the sweet spot. Maybe a certain wheel configuration becomes the efficiency winner. Maybe a new standard feature reduces the need to option up. These are small configuration choices that can matter a lot financially because the cheapest car isn't always the cheapest to own. And then there's the time value of waiting. If you wait for Juniper, you're not just waiting for a better car. You're paying opportunity cost, continuing to buy gas, continuing to maintain an older vehicle, or continuing to live without a car that fits your needs. If you drive a lot and you can save meaningful money on fuel, buying sooner can actually be the financially optimal move, even if a refresh is coming. But the reverse can also be true. If the current Model Y is selling at near full price, and you suspect a refresh will either come with the same price but better refinement or trigger big discounts on existing inventory, waiting could save you money. This is why the cleanest decision framework is to put a dollar value on waiting. Ask yourself, what does it cost me per month to not have the Model Y? If you're driving a gas SUV that costs you $150 more per month in fuel compared to EV charging, and you expect to wait 6 months, that's $900 in fuel difference. Add maintenance differences, maybe another couple hundred. If you think waiting will save you $3,000 in purchase price, then waiting still looks good. But if waiting only saves you $1,000 and you burn $900 in extra fuel and lose time and convenience, it's basically a wash. Now let's address the emotional side, because it affects ownership satisfaction, which is a real cost, even if it's not on a spreadsheet. Some people buy a new car and then feel buyer's remorse when the refresh arrives. That regret is predictable. It happens every time. The cure is to decide in advance what you value more, certainty and enjoyment now, or the chance at marginal improvements later. If you buy now, you're buying a known product with known strengths and weaknesses, and you're locking in your personal utility today. If you wait, you're accepting uncertainty around timing, pricing, and availability. Availability is another understated factor. At launch, refreshed models can have long wait times, limited color or trim availability, or early production quirks. Tesla generally improves build consistency over time within a generation. So if you're waiting for Juniper because you want the best, you might actually want to wait not just for the refresh, but for the refresh to mature a few months. And that circles back to ownership math. Early buyers often pay more and have fewer choices. Later buyers may get better pricing or incentives. So what should you do if you're deciding today with no perfect information? Here's a practical checklist you can apply without needing to guess exact Juniper specs. First, decide if you care about the refresh enough to pay for it. Put a number on it. Would you pay $2,000 more for a quieter cabin and refreshed interior? $5,000 more? If the answer is no, then you're probably a buyer who should be hunting for the best deal on the current Model Y or on a used one after the refresh lands. Second, get real financing and insurance quotes. Do not estimate. The monthly payment plus insurance is your true monthly cost to exist with this car. If that number is comfortable, you can buy. If it's not, the refresh won't fix it. Third, decide how long you'll keep it. If you keep cars 8 to 10 years, refresh timing matters less and deal timing matters more. If you swap every 3 years, refresh timing matters more because resale value is more important to you. Fourth, map your charging reality. If you can charge at home, the operating cost advantage is more predictable. If you rely on fast charging most of the time, your cost advantage shrinks, and you should be more price sensitive on the purchase. Fifth, be honest about feature priorities. Some people want the newest UI, the newest interior touches, and the latest look. That's okay. If it makes you happy and you can afford it, that's part of the value. But don't pretend it's a financial decision if it is. Now I want to emphasize something that gets lost in refresh discussions. The current Model Y is already a very capable vehicle. In most real-world use, commuting, road trips, cargo, family duty, you're not missing anything life-changing by not having the refresh, unless the refresh specifically fixes something that bothers you today, like cabin noise at highway speed or ride firmness on rough roads. Most refreshes are about making a product more competitive and more polished, not turning it into a completely different vehicle. That's why the ownership math ends up being the bigger story. The car is still the car, but the price you pay, the value it holds, and the cost to run it can shift dramatically around the refresh. And if you want one more way to think about it, think like this. Features are what you notice on day one. Ownership math is what you feel every month. If you buy a car that you love but you're stressed every month about the payment, the insurance, and the depreciation, the features won't save you. If you buy a car that's good enough but the deal is great, you'll enjoy it more than you expect because you feel in control financially. So if Juniper arrives in 2026 and it's better, and it probably will be better in lots of small ways, your decision should still be grounded in total cost. The effective purchase price after incentives, the financing terms, the insurance quote, expected depreciation, and your charging costs. For buyers who can wait, Juniper might be the more refined choice, and refinement is meaningful. For buyers who want the best ownership math, the best move might be to buy either discounted outgoing inventory right before or during the refresh transition, or buy a used pre-refresh Model Y after the market reprices them. And for current owners, the best move might be to ignore the hype unless you are already looking for a reason to trade. If your car meets your needs, the refresh doesn't take anything away from you. It just changes what the market thinks is new. If you want, paste the YouTube video description or transcript, and I can tailor this voice text to match the specific claims and points made in that video, pricing numbers, exact rumored changes, and any comparisons the creator used, while keeping it in an 18-20 minute narration style and still without headings.